Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Welcome back, everyone, to The Wilder Ride, Getting Wilder by the Minute, a podcast that celebrates the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time. And for Season 2, we are looking at the film Blazing Saddles 1, We've Been Suckered, folks, minute at a time. I'm your host, I'm Alan Sanders, and my co-host normally is Walt Murray. He is out for a personal day, so we'll let him back in tomorrow to play. But in the meantime, we do have a guest returning from yesterday, Eric Nash of the Watchmen Minute. Eric, welcome.
Yeah, great to be back a second day in a row here for our second minute.
And you were actually with us in Season 1, too.
That's right.
So we've hit two really good Mel Brooks, Gene Wilder films for you with our first two seasons.
Yeah, and like I said last minute, I mean, my other Mel Brooks is Spaceballs. That's a huge one for me, being a huge Star Wars fan. But, you know, Gene Wilder-wise, I mean, gosh, Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor, those are going to be some fun shows that I think you're going to get to. I sure hope.
Yes.
You know, I've seen most of them, I think.
I'm not saying what we're picking for Season 3 yet, but I might say that a train motif could play into it.
Yeah.
Just... things change. You know, we did not think we were going to do Blazing Saddles for Season 2. We thought, let's do something, quote, safer. And it turns out maybe the best thing we've done. So many people have said how much they love this movie, love the message of the movie. It even got, I don't know if it was the reason, but it got you to go to see it at the theater.
Yeah, it certainly helped, you know. I probably would have been interested. I probably, you know, but it definitely pushed me to make sure I got to see it.
See, that's so awesome. I would love to know what it'd be like to see it in the theater for the first time. You know what? Because we talked about this yesterday. I've said it before. My showing was always the TV version. I would love to, and I hope it becomes one of those Fathom events or one of those, you know, TCM or something where they're rebroadcasting it somewhere in the theater for a special 1 or 2 day run. I would love to see it with a group of people that are going to laugh out loud like I am.
Yeah, and that was a great experience to have that laugh out loud, those laugh out loud moments. To hear a lot of people really enjoying some of these crazy, goofy things happening.
This is, and you want to talk about a crazy, goofy. This minute starts what is going to be the avalanche of the closing of the movie. Everyone talks about how everything gets broken. The fourth wall gets broken. The studio wall gets broken. The other movie sets get broken. The timeline gets broken. I mean, starting today, everything starts to go off the rails for the next several minutes. So you actually get to be part of the big fight scene.
Yeah.
So let's set the stage for everybody. This minute number 82, you're coming in. We'll start off with, we have the Waco Kid was asked if he could squeeze off a shot yesterday. So we're going to continue with him today. He looks like he's getting prepared to shoot at something. Looks like the dynamite, perhaps. And we will end with a building exploding, knocking down a horse and its rider, and a bunch of bombastic theme music playing to fight by. So let's go ahead and start off at the very, very beginning here. I sort of teased this as we open here, Eric, that we've got this shot where Gene Wilder, at the very beginning of the minute, he's getting ready to get in position, and then we get a quick cutaway to Reverend Johnson, Howard Johnson, Lily Von Shtupp, Gabby Johnson, Van Johnson, and Samuel Johnson. They all turn their backs, I guess, to go look at the town, but they're going to plug their ears. And I think it's really...
They want to see it happen, that's for sure.
Right. And I want to point out the fact that they're plugging their ears, including Reverend Johnson, because what is not in the script is just as Gene Wilder is putting his gun on his forearm to use it to steady his shot.
I'll give it a try.
We hear Reverend Johnson say,
"Oh Lord, keep this man's eye keen."
And Gene goes, "Oh dear God," and he like lowers his head. Totally not in the script.
That at least of these 2 minutes, you know, and again, rewatching this movie in the future here, hopefully soon. But that reminds me the most of Young Frankenstein. Some of his just like, you know, he's surrounded by these idiots, you know, Igor and, you know.
I love how they Olson Johnson, who wasn't in the shot a second ago with his back to us, and Reverend Johnson, who just a second ago had his ears plugging with both hands, now has a Bible in his hands. It's starting to issue a prayer for, oh Lord, please give him, the ability to hold, the aim true.
And may God grant.
And he's getting beat by Olson and Howard Johnson. I laugh every single time because Gene Wilder does such a good job of really like focusing. I'm getting ready to squeeze off this ridiculously hard shot to make. And nothing matches. The continuity doesn't match. I mean, Reverend Johnson had his ears plugged a second ago, and
it's committing to the gag. I think I understand that it wasn't. You're saying it's ad libbed, but it's also committing to the gag, and that you're not going to show that he was getting ready to go into a diatribe or prognostication or what have you.
Yeah. It's so funny. And then to see the fact that after all of his speechifying and pontificating throughout the townspeople are just shut up.
Finally,
just stop it.
Well, and this is the most important for the time for this to happen. All the other times, okay, well, there wasn't anything quite as immediately necessary to get done as it is for the Waco Kid to fire this bullet. So they just need to get on with it.
Now, in the script as well, there was some additional dialogue that I don't think we necessarily needed. We get this about him, can you squeeze off a shot? Howard Johnson, played by Jonathan Hillerman, who plays Higgins in Magnum P.I., a lot of people know him. He's supposed to say, what? Hit something over 2,000 yards away with a 6-shooter? Can't be done. Almost like the scriptwriters are like, we just need to say this for the audience so we realize this is a ridiculous shot. But did we really need someone to point that out for us?
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that, they're using the telescope in the other scenes to see fairly clearly, and not that close up, but just a little bit clearer, as to make sure that it's the right group going into town.
Right.
The bad guys.
And I like the idea of keeping the mystique of this awesome 6-shooter, this speed gun artist who's the fastest hands in the world, not just the West, the world.
Right.
Able to make an accurate shot from 2,000 yards away. I don't need somebody to say it can't be done. I know. We already know Jim can do it. Right?
Right.
No surprise. I like the fact, though, that we don't get the shot just off the bat. We actually cut right back into the center of town of Rock Ridge. And these guys have been riding up and down, and it hasn't occurred to them yet that none of the horses have moved that were cardboard cutouts. None of the people have moved. And we do get a quick shot. If you look very closely, right around second 12, it looks like we've got the back of a cardboard cutout to our shot. It doesn't look like the front, to the bottom left corner of the screen. It looks like they didn't necessarily paint both sides. That just goes to show these guys are so into shooting everything up, they haven't paid attention yet.
That's our question from last minute.
Yep.
They really are that dumb.
They really are that dumb. Taggart, played by Slim Pickens, eventually gets off his horse, and this is the only full-size set piece that we have for this particular shot in the middle of the desert. And it's going to be interesting because when he goes to kick the door in, the whole building front, the whole facade falls down. When it does, if you notice, Eric, there's absolutely nothing else around. There's no other buildings to the left, to the right, nothing.
Well, and I think that's a matter of the town that they're really riding around in is like the same town that we've seen so far.
Right.
It's that good of a replica is possibly the idea, but they also didn't want to have to actually build a town that was kind of fake. They already had a town that was real, and it looks good enough to be close enough to being fake anyway.
Right. And it's something that when it's going this fast and you edit it back to them in the real town, it's hard to, you don't really pay attention. But when this building falls, because all the buildings are literally lined up side by side by side, they're all on the same boardwalk, whether they're on the one side of the street or the other. There is nothing to the left or to the right of this false facade that Slim Pickens knocks over with his kick. It's funny, but at the same time, the edit is so good when he turns around and he yells,
It's a fake! We've been suckered in!
then we cut right back to Jim, who's lined up his shot and takes the shot. And there's something really satisfying about it taking a few seconds before it actually hits. And then we go back to the miniature and we see somebody getting truly blown sky high.
Yeah, right.
What was that like in the theater when you see this little dummy go flying literally 40 or 50 feet above the tallest structure?
Well, and I think really it's supposed to be probably horses.
We're going to see another one later.
I know
yes.
there's another one. Yeah, the horses are clear. Yeah, in a few more seconds. But, yeah, and it could easily be maybe one of the dummies or one of the actual bad guys that's supposed to be there. But overall, in a sense, it's really, I guess, maybe going to be, in making the effect a dummy anyway. One way or the other, it's a dummy.
It's just something funny about, again, cartoonish.
Yeah.
About watching an explosion launch somebody 100 feet up in the air above the town. It's shot actually in a little bit of a slow motion to give it that sense of scale. When I don't know how much you know about explosives and stuff, but remember they had a single plunger that was tied to the dynamite. Does dynamite actually trigger other dynamite later if you don't have an electrical charge or some kind of fuse burning?
Old daisy chain kind of connection. I don't know if that's really supposed to be going on or what, but yeah, the one single shot, and that brings me to what I mentioned I'd get to today, and the thing that was mentioned yesterday was I really wanted for today. What I kind of wanted to see though was say the one of the many packages, say, of dynamite. And like a little, I don't know, something, fuse or whatever, being struck by, but I mean, you don't necessarily have to see the bullet because the bullet's going awfully fast, but being with a little spark on it and then zoom out to the overall explosion. So that leads to yesterday, which could have been, we could have seen maybe the cause, the kink in the line of the fuse, maybe.
As to why the plunger didn't work.
Having been, having a little problem in it, and then the spark ending and, not continuing along very near the dynamite, hopefully would be the neat thing, I think. It's almost like in the cartoons when the character would wet their finger and thumb and then put out a little fuse that's running along.
Another thing that might have been funny and certainly cartoonish is after the plunger, obviously it's better story-wise for Jim to do it, but I could also see a funny way of one of Taggart, like maybe Lyle happens to walk up and he sees that the dynamite's not connected. He's like, well, that's not going to work. And he reconnects it.
Yeah.
It's like Lyle.
Causing their own demise.
Dynamite's not going to blow if you leave it unconnected. That would have been pretty funny too. And I guess we get different kinds of explosions too. Maybe they had different charges because with the long shot launched somebody up in the air. But at about second 31 to 32, we've got a smaller explosion, but it knocks everybody off their horse, but not up in the air. And then we get another shot of outside of a store. Looks like the same store, by the way, that Taggart actually already kicked over. If you notice.
Yeah, right. Oh my gosh. That's great.
So set it back up. Now we're going to have it blow up. Because it's the same flat facade. It's the same building he just knocked over a few seconds ago. But now there's a charge behind the fake door and it blows the door open and it sends 1, 2, 3, 4 different riders, 3 falling and 1 kind of turning sideways. And then we pull back to another shot of the miniature. And another explosion sends what looks like 2 horses and a person up into the air. So this town is just, this same movie came out the year of The Towering Inferno, another disaster movie. But I would argue that this town has turned into its own version of The Towering Inferno. Everything's just going up in smoke. Had you ever seen that, by the way, in the 70s? That was the big, everybody in the world was in that movie.
I feel like I've seen parts of it. I definitely have seen, if not all of, possibly pretty close to all of, like, Poseidon Adventure would be the big disaster. I think that's the granddaddy of all. I would hope. I would think, because I've seen it most of, I think. But Towering Inferno, bits and pieces here and there.
Well,
but
this same year, not only did Towering Inferno come out, but Earthquake also came out.
Oh.
Just two big, major disaster movies. And then here comes Mel Brooks with the movie that everybody thought was going to be a failure and it wasn't going to make it, and it becomes the number one movie at the box office. Yeah, he only spent $3 million. That's all Warner Brothers gave him to make this movie, and it netted in 1974 $119 million at the domestic box office. The number one movie. And oh, by the way, by the end of 1974, he would have the number 4 take at the box office with Young Frankenstein. Isn't it amazing?
That's an amazing year for him, for Mel and Gene together, both in a sense. But
I think after 1974, there was no telling Mel Brooks no. He could make anything he wanted. He had nobody telling him no. And look, he's still alive to this day, right now, at least at the time of this recording, going on speaking engagements and talking about not only this movie, but having had the Young Frankenstein musical come out a couple of years ago. They just last year released the Young Frankenstein Making of Coffee Table book, which, by the way, is fantastic. If you haven't ordered that from Amazon yet, I wish, and maybe there is one, but I just haven't seen it. I wish they would have a kind of the same thing for Blazing Saddles, just this big picture book of all the making and behind the scenes and pictures, because it would make a great double set to have both Young Frankenstein and Blazing Saddles on the coffee table.
Yeah, I'm definitely. I don't know that I quite remember you maybe talking about that during the Young Frankenstein.
Yeah,
by minute. So I'm gonna find that.
It's fantastic. Get it. And I know we talked about it, but also I know I had several. Of course, the problem with Facebook is as things get buried, as things get replaced with newer and newer images. But we actually even put a link at the time it came out to go out and get the book.
Okay.
But check it out. Yeah, the coffee table book, The Making of Young Frankenstein. It's like watching the movie in like a slideshow. You're like going through.
Okay,
and it's awesome.
Right.
So we get a shot now at looks like right about 41 seconds actually, 40 into 41. We're all back on the ridge. All the members of Rock Ridge are cheering. They're throwing their hats up, and then Bart gives the battle cry. Just a second ago, it was all rocks, and they were standing. Jim and Bart were on two very prominently higher placed rocks or boulders. And then we go a reverse shot. I don't know where they shot this, but this couldn't have been the same overlook that they're going to come charging down. I mean, it's completely a different shot.
Yeah, different location for sure. I mean, that's some crazy terrain difference.
I do like the fact that they all come over the hill, but they all are smiling when they're doing it, almost like they're having too much fun about what they're about to do. You know, it doesn't look serious at all that we're going into battle. This isn't that gladiator scene when you're charging the oncoming horde. This is they're having a good time. Cleavon Little's got a big smile. The Waco Kid's got a smile. Charlie's got a big stick above his head. He's smiling. This is about to become, like I said, probably the craziest mass fight or riot or battle we've ever seen on screen. I
think the next closest thing you can get, and it's a comedy too, is Monty Python and the Holy Grail. You know, that end-ish and fourth wall breaking scene there is probably fairly similar, I think, and probably done around the same time. I'm pretty sure that's pretty much early mid-70s is when they made that movie.
Yeah, Holy Grail came out the year after, 1975.
Yeah.
I would argue, because we've actually had this discussion before about how the ending works, and spoilers, as we move forward for these remaining few minutes of the movie, we're going to end up in 1974 for a bit before returning back to 1874. Something that actually happens at the end of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where they show up in modern England and get arrested by a bunch of constables. Mm-hmm. I would argue.
Yeah, they're knights. They're knights, and modern day automobiles, right. Police cars.
I would argue Mel Brooks handled that shift much better than Monty Python. For me, I felt like Monty Python almost just kind of ended.
And that's more what Monty Python did was just a very abrupt changes, segues, the non sequiturs. Actually, I think is what they
One of the things I will get to when we actually do make it to the scenes that we are in the modern day, and modern day at the term of the making of the movie in 1974, when we had a chance to interview Burton Gilliam, he had only done one other film before this movie, and just somehow was one of those, just had the right face, right look, right voice, and just managed to luck his way into Hollywood. He said he never understood the ending, and we had an interview with him, and we're going to release that whole interview. We've been releasing snippets as it makes sense, but I said, well, let me tell you what I think is going on. When I got there, he goes, well, I think that's right.
We interrupt this episode to bring you a moment from our interview with actor Burton Gilliam.
You know, it was, if there is a craziness to the picture that just comes out of nowhere, that's it right there. And over the years, the critics, if that's one of the things that they really harp on, and it is crazy, but the picture is, I don't think it really doesn't fit in the picture, but they had to, I guess, they had to find some way to make this thing work. I have never talked to Mel about this. Never talked to Richard about it. And Richard was, boy, he was so good to me, let me tell you. But I don't think that they had a place to go. I've never talked to Mel about it. Maybe that's one of the things I need to talk to him about after I tell him about after I say, hey, won't you give me a couple of million?
Yeah. Why don't we just say 2 million? We'll call it even.
Yeah,
right?
that'd be good.
Just between friends.
That's it. 2 million will be even. That's it.
Well, I'll give you, as a kind of a student of film and just a lover of film, I always thought, because the whole premise that Andrew Bergman's original story about, well, how do I talk about the rise of, Harlem and Black Power of 1974, but I don't want to set it in a contemporary time, even though I want to address this issue of racism, of prejudice. And he goes, well, wouldn't it be fun to set it back 100 years? I think you had to do that for the audience. You had to remind them, we're not just telling a story of some guy 100 years ago. We're telling you a story that actually is taking place now.
Right now. Yes. Right. A different setting, but it's taking place right now.
And that it's the same message. It's treat people the way they deserve to be treated, not just because of what they look like.
Yes, you've got to look a little bit deeper into the picture than just what you see on the screen. And if you do that, you're going to come out just fine.
We now take you back to the Wilder ride.
So it was great to have the actor who was in it, who to this day, or till we had the interview, wasn't quite sure why Mel Brooks went into 1974. And then when I gave my theory, he goes, oh, that sounds good. So maybe he was just humoring me. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see if I've got anything. But since we won't have you for those minutes, but you had it. You're a special exception because you've never seen this movie until a few weeks ago, and you're coming on the show to talk about it, having seen it only really once, with maybe now these minutes reviewed a few times. What did you think about shifting into current time and then back to the Old West as the movie started to wrap up?
Well, and I was glad for the back to the Old West. I mean, and it did take me a bit by surprise because I was never aware that anything like that would happen. Coming to more modern day.
Yeah, more.
But it's definitely not now modern day, but modern day when the movie was being made. And so it took me by surprise a bit, but I also was like, okay, well, immediately, the other movies such as Holy Grail is came to mind, and it's like I dig this, this is a great thing to do. Even Young Frankenstein, I think we had some issues of, well, when is this really taking place? That's for sure. So yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it. I'm glad they went back as well, though. That really works out better for the overall point of the story. Whereas something like Monty Python and Holy Grail, I mean, to find a point is a lot tougher.
No, I just feel like they said, you know what, we're
is there any kind of lesson,
we're out of
morals?
jokes. We just need to end it on a really crazy, ironic twist, and it just ended. I remember when I watched, I was like, that's how it's ending. They're getting arrested by modern day officers of the London police force. That's it. But I guess if you had never seen something like that before, like I saw Holy Grail much, much later in life than I did compared to Blazing Saddles. I think I was probably in my early 20s. And so I was like, well, Blazing Saddles did this so much better. So, and not even knowing at the time which came first or second. Blazing Saddles did, in fact, come out first. Mel Brooks just was so far ahead of his time with, the style of humor for making a movie. And I do love, especially a lot of his earlier stuff. Some of his later stuff, I think, is really good in places, but it does tend to feel, it gets stale faster than these movies, the older movies. I still love History of the World. I still love The Producers. Still love High Anxiety is probably his best acting. So he was just such a great talent and really reinvented the whole way of doing comedy in my mind. You would not have Airplane if it weren't for Mel Brooks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't have Top Secret. You wouldn't have the Zucker Brothers, all those comedies.
And really, I think that's what I've found, at least a couple of the gags in the behind the scenes or the deleted stuff you did. You had me watch, and you gave a link for yesterday's show. There were a couple parts of that certainly did remind me of Airplane. Yeah. So, and I know that Airplane came out after this. So.
Yeah, it definitely came out after.
Yeah.
So now we're at the start of this fight scene, and it is going to continue and continue and continue. We got lots of bits and gags. We come back to the town. We see another false facade getting blown up and guys going off horseback. The citizens of Rock Ridge haven't shown up yet, so they better be careful, because if the dynamite's still going off, you want to make sure all those charges have finished what they're doing before you show up.
Yeah.
And that's where the minute ends. This actually felt like a really fast episode, but I think these last several minutes are probably going to go by faster simply because we've got a lot of just nonsense violence and fighting, and it's turning into every ending of every Wild West movie. And talk about the Wilder ride. It's a wilder ending here that we're getting for Blazing Saddles. And this is going to go on for literally the last almost 10 minutes of the movie. We're going to have, or about 8 minutes, we're going to have discussion of this mass riot spilling out from the Warner Brothers, from the lot, actually out onto the streets of Los Angeles, and all the way over to Mann's Chinese Theater, or Grumman's, actually, I think at the time, Grumman's Chinese Theater. So, Eric, before we wrap up this minute, though, is there anything that you wanted to mention about this minute before I ask you about Watchmen? Because I had a question for you that I mentioned yesterday. I said I would get to it today. But before we do that, anything about this minute that we didn't cover?
The only other thing from this minute, it just looks a little bit like him, I think, is when Slim Pickens kicks down the one building.
Mm-hmm. Before it blows up later.
Yeah, the cardboard cutout, what have you, of the gentleman standing there in a pretty nice suit, but he's very reminiscent to me of Van Johnson and the actor playing him, George Firth. That I figured out. Just his and just that actor himself. That's one of the. There's certainly there's Hillerman.
Mm-hmm.
And Alex Karras that I like, oh my gosh, he's in this. I didn't know that going into it until I saw his name in the credits, and I kind of tried to look for him and so forth. But no, this one actor I didn't really until doing these minutes, and I did come across his IMDb and like, oh my gosh, yeah, that is that guy. That kind of a more meekish character actor is the kind of guy that he plays. But just the fact that that one stand-in cutout looks a little bit like him to me. So I don't know if you noticed any of the other cutouts looking like anyone else
in this fight. Not necessarily, not so much. I didn't even, in fact, I kind of just dismissed him as sort of a townsperson. We did see in the which was very prominent in the scenes that were taken out that we looked at yesterday, Lily von Stupp, and she was purposely drawn in her black performing bodice and and I don't know what you would call sensual evening wear. And Mongo was actually a cutout in yesterday's scenes that we didn't really go into the cutouts. I do want to, since you brought that up, this is actually a perfect place for me to mention from the script. Mongo actually was upset, according to the script. He was supposedly asked to go start putting the cardboard cutouts and he was looking for himself, and he couldn't find himself. And there was this whole little bit of a gag about Mongo finding himself. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah. Wow.
But so there is a Mongo cutout in the outtakes that we posted the link to for YouTube in the listeners group. And it's just kind of funny to pause and just kind of look at all the different characters and the fact that they actually even bothered to create cutouts of horses too, but not a single thing of a move. And yet it fools these guys long enough to keep them in town for the for Jim to shoot the dynamite. It set off the chain reaction of events that we're going to continue to go through for these next several minutes. All right, before I get to all the other ending stuff, you are part of the Watchmen Minute that wrapped up earlier this year. And you mentioned yesterday the comic book, the official sequel to the original Alan Moore story of The Watchmen. I only saw
Alan Moore doesn't want anything to do with.
Yeah, and has nothing.
It's totally.
Yeah,
but DC wants to.
They want to sell some comic books, right?
Create some stuff, and yeah.
And I understand they also were sort of crossing it into some of the more recognizable superheroes too, which I don't think Alan Moore wanted to do that. What are your thoughts of the sequel comic book, not the HBO series that's getting ready to launch, but the comic book? Yeah,
which we know fairly little, awfully little about, but no, yeah, I'm all up to date. Like I think at this point it was just issue 9 that came out a few weeks ago. At this point, and yeah, I mean I've really been enjoying it, and apparently a lot of other people are like yourself are kind of waiting for the trade is the parlance used. But yeah, I mean, and how they're pulling in a lot of the DC characters. I mean, like, whether it's all kind of seeming to culminate with Superman, the DC in the DC universe, the Justice League and so forth, versus Dr. Manhattan. I mean, and Dr. Manhattan himself, he is this being that he knows he's not totally omniscient, but he is omniscient for himself. He knows his past and future, except for every now and then when there's some kind of tachyon issue with maybe related to a nuclear device going off or some such close enough to him, I guess, that would cause these issues. So he has these various segments in his life, seemingly, but he seems to be. He's talked about how he's aware of this confrontation with Superman coming up. And my biggest thing is that I love how at the end of Watchmen, it's not much of a spoiler, but one thing he says at the end is he says to one person in the book and someone else in the movie, I think I'm going to go off and create some life somewhere in the universe. And with DC, that is such a huge thing for DC. I mean, back at around the same time as Watchmen, and there was the other big one, Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. But right around the same time, they also had their huge event, culminating previous decades worth of other Earths, other parallel universes in a sense. And that was called Crisis on Infinite Earths. It's just this they for a long time, they have dealt with the idea of all these different Earths and Earth 1 and 2 and 3 and so on, up to possibly 52 and who knows, maybe even more. And how they maybe came all into being. Maybe it was Dr. Manhattan. Maybe it was other beings, very, very godlike beings, even more godlike than Wonder Woman and her similar to Thor a bit. With their little more God creation story.
Gotcha.
Histories, whether it's Greek or Roman or what have you.
The official story, the sequel, if you missed it yesterday, is called Doomsday Clock. It feels like DC's trying to tie that into like their whole Rebirth series or something.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they're one of their more recent, the most recent reboot. And they did try a reboot just a few short years before Rebirth. But this one was supposed to be a pretty big one, and really seemed to satisfy a lot of the fans, and hopefully get some new readers too. But yeah, they've tied it in ever since that happened, right at the same time, and then even there was even a couple issues of each of Batman and Flash, Flash is always involved with these crises. There's this issue with the Button, and the Button is something that's very well known to Watchmen fans, and it's the comedian's little smiley face button.
Yeah, the have a nice
that
day
has a drop of his blood on it. Yeah.
Which, by the way, ironically, we have a have a nice day happy face in Blazing Saddles as a tie-in.
Yeah, I did
on the back of the
that,
KKK uniforms.
Yep. That's not a great thing that it's there. But
well, no, the irony though that members of the KKK would want you to have a nice day,
right?
Like they're a caring bunch.
Yeah.
So have you enjoyed? Okay, because I love the original Watchmen graphic novel series, the 12-part episodic series. It was a single story in 12 issues. I loved it cover to cover. I read all the supplemental material. I read all the stuff in the front and the back. Every bit. I've read it multiple times. Is Clock or a Doomsday Clock a worthy sequel to get?
I don't feel like I can say that just yet. I mean, I'm enjoying it. Going in one issue every month or two ish. Mm-hmm. They started off, one a month, but just like three issues in, they said, "Sorry guys, fans, we're gonna have to go push this to 2 months, one issue every 2 months." But I'm enjoying it, but I don't know if I can fully say something like that yet. I think it's going to be worth rereading from my point of view, and then giving, maybe after a couple rereads, I would say even giving a clear, definitive statement that, hey, okay, it's, if you really loved Watchmen, then 75% maybe, or something. Who knows, that of a chance that you're gonna think it's awfully pretty good as well.
I did read the first one that was available as a digital download, and I thought they did a pretty good job matching the tone of a sort of a different version of the 80s where Nixon is still the president. You have all these protests and anarchy in the streets, and I was like, okay, they're matching a similar tone to the Watchmen series, but I'd only read the first episode, so I didn't know where it went from there, and it was hard to get a sense of where the story was going to go.
Yeah, I totally understand that. Yeah, because that's the one I definitely read the most so far. I have reread some of the issues, but not too many lately. But that first issue, I think I've read that 4, maybe 5 times, and then the second issue probably only twice, and none since. Unfortunately, none besides one initial reading so far. Probably right before the 12th issue, I'll probably go ahead and reread it all just before that 12th.
Yeah. Well, while we're on our comic book nerddom here for a second. I told you yesterday that the two, in terms of like an episodic start to finish full complete stories that are my favorite in the quote comic book world. I would argue for anybody who thinks these are the same things as Garfield and other comic strips, that's a whole different thing, is V for Vendetta along with Watchmen. And I honestly think V for Vendetta is a little bit of a better story to me. I'm just curious what you thought. Have you read the V for Vendetta series?
Oh, yeah, I certainly have read it. And it actually took me quite a while then to also watch the movie version of it. But yeah, I read that a few years ago now. I should read it again, but I enjoyed it awfully well. So that's definitely one I want to get back to soon. Yeah, I also really like for Alan Moore, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Yeah, which, by the way, the movie was okay-ish, but
I've only seen like 3/4 of that.
Oh, the comic book was ridiculously good. I think anything Alan Moore put his hands on was just ridiculously good. His single issue story, the Batman Joker origin story of the Killing Joke, may be the single best Batman story that's ever been put out.
And he's touched well more than that. I mean, he's very popular for Swamp Thing.
Yep.
He's done the single stories for Green Lantern stuff, for Superman. He's varied there from there in the 80s essentially. Yeah. He was touching lots of different things in the 80s.
I got into comics for a little bit for probably about 6 or 7 years, for a period of time that was probably amazing, and I didn't even realize it was during the Frank Miller, Alan Moore days of just reinventing the comic book story in a way that was like, oh my God. This is gritty and hard and tough, and in the case of the Killing Joke, R-rated. I mean, it's great. I mean, I'm not trying to say that it has to be R-rated to be great. It was just, wow, these are adult stories told almost like movie storyboards. All right, well, we've talked a little bit about Watchmen. You actually were part of the Watchmen Minute. You may have a project or two coming up as well.
Yeah, and I've really been talking a lot, through Watchmen Minute itself. I've been kind of gearing people up for Almost Famous Minute, So hopefully my current date is September 1st. Hopefully that works out with getting enough recorded ahead of time, getting stuff in the can, because I hate to go on any breaks. And I'm actually even going to do like through the run of it'll be 3 minutes a week. And through the run, I'm actually going to have 1 minute or 1 week at a time. Every so often, 3 of these one week breaks. Just go ahead, planned, scheduled in, and just to give me a little buffer. Should a little something happen, and that should hopefully take care of that, and not have to go on any hiatuses unless something really kind of major happens.
Well, I've been a Cameron Crowe fan, and most of his scripts, most of his movies, and this one being the quote unquote somewhat autobiographical story of how he got to where he is as a screenwriter. If you're looking for someone to fill in a minute or so, definitely put me on the list. Almost Famous, such a good movie, even if you're a casual music fan, but the story of this 15-year-old kid trying to write for Rolling Stone, it's awesome.
Yeah, and because it's so much music centered around the ideas of music and rock and pop and so forth, especially in the 70s. I'm more of a Beatles guy, the previous decade, as well as more of an alternative guy, the 90s decade. But between the two in the middle, 70s and 80s, I'm definitely more 70s.
if you had to
80s gets a little crazy for me.
Yeah, and unfortunately, since I was a child of the 80s, like that's our go-to. That's the one thing we can all agree on. Usually we can just say, play 80s rock or 80s pop, and we're okay because we're all a bunch of one-hit wonders.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, only the one hit. The hits for the 80s, that's about all. I can't go too deep on the mainstream that wasn't hits.
Because that's all I remember is the 80s were so many one-hit wonders. They'd have that big smash hit. Everybody had MTV. And so everybody was watching the music videos, and so everybody suddenly had to like look hot and wear makeup and perm their hair. Just all right. That's one project, Almost Famous. You said you've got another one maybe in the works.
So the other one is way more music driven, and it is in the style of, if you're familiar with Alphabetical, or there's the one for Prince, there's one for Weird Al. So this one is I'm working with Zach. He actually is only posted, I think, in the Star Wars Minute listeners group on Facebook, but that's how we got together. Mm-hmm. But Zach and I for Feels Like Weezer, going through Weezer's all their songs, their discography, one track at a time.
Wow, that's awesome.
And it's a big list, and but we're starting at the beginning.
Weezer is my younger kids. They're of the mindset that Weezer's like written a lot of these songs, and then we're like, no, that's a cover. So
that's the recent Teal album. Yeah,
that's fantastic though. I haven't listened to any of the music podcasts. I know there's the ABC Devo podcast, and then the Beatle. What'd you call it? With the ABC Alphabetical. I think that'd be fun to listen to, especially if there was a body of music, especially if you love the band. If I had to pick one, although it'd be so hard because they got so many songs, but Pink Floyd is probably my all-time favorite band.
Yeah. Wow.
And could you imagine going through the discography of Pink Floyd one song at a time? I mean, crap. Just if you did Animals, you got the second song, Dogs, is a 18.5-minute song.
I just listened to that album last night.
Oh my God.
Go on.
Awesome. Yep. Loved it. I played it for my daughter the other day. I'm like, you got to listen to this song and how cool it is. And she's like, Dad, do I need to be on drugs? I'm like, no.
Don't take drugs.
No, don't. Drugs are bad. Anyway. All right, Eric, anything else that you're working on, or do you want to point people to if they want to reach out to you?
Just my Twitter handle is probably the best, Lucky Mustard. You can Instagram me if you add ing to that.
Okay.
Someone grab that.
So Lucky Mustarding.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate you being here. I want to take a quick second to let everybody know Walt should be back tomorrow. He's been on a little bit of a hiatus, and it's been great to have Eric here these last 2 minutes, just me and him chatting about Blazing Saddles and Watchmen and whatever else we wanted to talk about. But come on back tomorrow. We live at thewilderride.com. That's got everything you need to know, from our episodes to links. We had a previous guest who said, remind everybody you guys even have YouTube channels. A lot of the other listeners that may not be as hip to podcatchers and things, and they don't know what it is to download a podcast or whatever. YouTube, we're there. You can go anywhere as long as you've got the YouTube app, or you just go to youtube.com, search for The Wilder Ride. Every one of our episodes is up there as well. So come on back tomorrow, where we will be here for Wednesday, Hump Day. It is Igor's favorite day of the week. We're going to be joined by Neil McGowan, who's going to take us through the citizens of Rockridge making their way into the town to now suddenly start fighting the bad guys. You'd think the dynamite could have done it all, but nope, we're going to have a massive riot. And we will end with a riot in the streets as the camera begins a crane shot pulling up and back and away from downtown Rockridge. And we'll have all of that coming up tomorrow on this, The Wilder Ride. Just trying to... So Dr. Manhattan, does he come back in Clockwork Doom? Or Doomsday Clock? Clockwork Doom.
He does get involved. He is there in some later issues, that's for sure.
Wow. Do they explain how he comes back? Adequately?
Well, yeah, that's part of that rereading that I'm going to need to do. That's for sure. To get a better handle on this before it really ends.
Wow. I'm gonna have to just end saying I want to read when it comes out.
There's other people that come back that will scratch your head more than that.
Really?
Yes.
All right. And I need an underling. I need a protege. I need a Jim. I need a Waco Kid that I can lean on for like there to do this kind of stuff. Nobody wants to do it for free though. That kind of sucks.
The other one is just me. So, but I'm only doing 3 episodes a week.
Yeah. Taking a page out of the Mad Max guys, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a part of me that goes, why? Why are we doing 5 days a week? And why did we make every episode closer to between 45 minutes to an hour?
Yeah, right.
Everybody wants to talk more this season, so it is what it is. So.